From 1970 to 1979, British cinema shifted into something darker. On the surface, everything still looked polished, but underneath it was unraveling. These were films made without restraint, full of heat and discomfort, dragging the unspeakable into view. Scum is the kind of film that opens in a prison van and never lets you exhale. Carlin arrives at a borstal where rehabilitation is something mentioned on paperwork but ignored behind the walls. Guards play favorites, dole out beatings, and keep order through humiliation. Inmates form their own structure, one built entirely on violence and psychological warfare. Carlin enters quietly but adapts quickly, rising through the hierarchy, not out of ambition, but necessity. The environment doesn't offer options, it offers roles, and if you want to survive, you pick one fast. The story builds a world where vulnerability is a target and silence is safer than honesty. It shows rape, suicide, and racial violence. Not to shock, but because that's the system, nothing is exaggerated. The BBC originally commissioned the story in 1977, but pulled it before it aired, afraid of the backlash. Alan Clark didn't argue. He reshot the whole thing as a feature film, made it harsher, and forced it onto the big screen. Ray Winstone was still new and barely trained, but Clark guided him into a performance that still defines him. The film's raw texture comes from its shooting style, using real locations and natural light to keep everything grounded. When it was finally released in 1979, the controversy wasn't about tone, it was about truth. Everyone recognized the place on screen, they just didn't want to admit it existed. I Start Counting begins with a schoolgirl named Win Kinch watching the world change around her. Her family has moved to a cold new town built on brutalist concrete and fading optimism. She spends her time daydreaming about her foster brother George, a grown man with a strange past and a warm smile that doesn't always match what he's doing. There's been a string of murders in the area, girls her age going missing, and Win begins to wonder if George is responsible. She follows him, spies on him, notices a sweater she gave him tossed into the trash, stained with something red. The tension sits on her shoulders like a coat too big. She wants to be wrong, but keeps finding reasons she might be right. The film isn't about answers. It's about that terrifying period when your fantasies and fears start to mix. Jenny Agutter was 16 when she filmed it, playing 14, and her performance was uncomfortable in a way that felt honest. The camera lingers in ways that raised eyebrows, but that's what made it so unsettling. Shot in Bracknell, one of England's post-war new towns. The setting looks like a future that already feels like a mistake. Director David Green avoided turning the story into a neat thriller. He let the strangeness sit, layered realism with quiet dread, and made a film that critics ignored, but that audiences remembered. It never gives a full answer, because the scariest part is thinking she might be right. The Vampire Lovers opens with fog, blood, and an invitation to look closer. Carmilla, a mysterious and beautiful woman, arrives at a noble household under suspicious circumstances. Young women in the region begin to die slowly, drained and dreaming of something they can't name. Carmilla forms a deep bond with the daughter of the house, Laura, and then with her friend Emma. The intimacy between them grows into obsession, with dreams blurring into reality and affection turning parasitic. This wasn't a vampire story that tiptoed, it leaned hard into seduction and possession, using atmosphere as both weapon and warning. Ingrid Pitt plays Carmilla with a calm, predatory presence that makes everything feel more dangerous when she smiles. The Vampire Lovers came from Hammer Studios, who were trying to reinvent their horror formula by adding more eroticism and ambiguity. Based loosely on Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, the film leaned into lesbian undertones that were rare for the time and outright taboo in some countries. It pushed British censorship right up to the edge, but slipped through by cloaking everything in gothic pageantry. The production was sleek, the castles real, and the dresses always falling off one shoulder. Pitt became a cult icon almost overnight, and her chemistry with her female co-stars helped the film age far better than many of its male-led counterparts. What made it last wasn't the blood, it was the way it made the danger feel tender. Virgin Witch starts with two sisters, Christine and Betty, running away to London for work. But what they find isn't fashion, it's something ritualistic. Christine is confident, drawn to power, and seems to know things she shouldn't. Betty is younger, more hesitant, a follower who doesn't see what's coming until it's already arrived. When Christine gets scouted by a modeling agent named Sybil Waite, the job turns into a trip to a countryside estate where a coven of witches host their rituals. Christine accepts initiation almost too easily, revealing psychic gifts that put her in competition with Sybil, the High Priestess. Gerald Amberley, the coven's leader, takes Christine's virginity in a scene meant to mirror spiritual possession as much as seduction. The power struggle escalates into violence, betrayal, and psychic manipulation until Christine kills Sybil and claims her place as the new leader. The film was shot in 1970, but stalled in release due to censorship battles over full frontal nudity, occult sexuality, and lesbian overtones. Anne and Vicky Michelle, real-life sisters, played Christine and Betty, adding an odd sense of intimacy to their scenes. Ray Austin directed it as a one-off, before heading to mainstream TV work, making this a strange outlier in his otherwise clean career. The Greater London Council allowed limited screening before the BBFC demanded cuts, and the uncut version only circulated later on home video. It didn't need a strong plot. It had ritual, flesh, and fog, which was enough to make it a cult object for a very specific crowd. Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny, and Girly starts inside a mansion where the clocks are ticking, but time isn't moving. A grown man named Sonny pretends to be a schoolboy. His sister Girly calls him brother with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes, and their mother and Nanny keep up the game like it's the only thing keeping the house upright. When they lure a man back home and call him new friend, it becomes clear the game has rules. Break them, and you disappear. The film unfolds like a twisted fairy tale, where nursery rhymes turn into death sentences. Girly flirts with the new friend, Sonny grows jealous, and the game stops being pretend. Girly ends up killing Sonny in a panic, then Nanny gets hacked to death when she tries to keep the rules in place. The family reassembles itself with one less player, like nothing ever happened. Freddie Francis adapted the story from a stage play, and you can feel it in the rhythm. It's claustrophobic, theatrical, and weirdly intimate. The incestuous subtext almost got it banned, especially a finger-sucking scene that censors flagged immediately. Vanessa Howard, who played Girly, was in her 20s but styled like a child, which only made things more uncomfortable. British theaters pulled back after release, afraid of the controversy, and the film basically vanished. It did better in America, under the shorter title Girly, where it was sold on shock and sex. It's now a cult film, remembered for being eerie, perverse, and hard to place. The Wicker Man begins when a police sergeant named Neil Howie lands on an island where no one seems to care that a little girl has vanished. He's deeply religious, tight-lipped, and unwilling to laugh at the townspeople's customs. The people of Summer Isle sing about fertility, dance around maypoles, and treat sex as something sacred. As Howie digs deeper, the clues don't add up. The girl is missing, but everyone swears she never existed. What looks like a simple disappearance unravels into a setup with centuries of planning. Howie thinks he's getting closer to the truth, but by the time he sees the wicker effigy, it's already too late. The shock comes not just from the fire, but from the smiles of the crowd watching it burn. Director Robin Hardy didn't plan for it to become a cult film, but budget cuts, studio interference, and a chaotic release only added to the myth. Britt Ekland's naked dance scene was performed with a body double, which led to personal fallout. Rod Stewart, her boyfriend at the time, tried to block the film out of jealousy. Her voice was dubbed too, making her performance feel oddly disconnected. The original cut was chopped by over 20 minutes, reordered by the distributor, and nearly lost. What survived was still haunting enough to change the genre. Critics now call it folk horror, but in 1973, it was exploitation dressed in ritual robes. What lingers is not the death, but the celebration around it. Die screaming. Marianne begins with a nightclub dancer who's not running from danger, she's running from family. Marianne's father is a corrupt ex-judge hiding out in Portugal with secrets locked away in a Swiss bank account. Those secrets could ruin him, and Marianne has access to them once she turns 21. Her half-sister Hildegard wants the inheritance too, and she doesn't mind spilling blood to get it. Marianne meets Sebastian, who charms her into marriage, but she pulls a switch and ends up wedding his friend Eli instead. Sebastian runs back to Portugal, furious, and aligns himself with Hildegard. Together they try to drag Marianne back for a sauna-based torture session that's as strange as it sounds. But she slips through their hands again and again, leaving behind confusion, betrayal, and eventually a couple of corpses. The story never settles into a rhythm because it isn't about clarity, it's about heat, paranoia, and survival. Susan George plays Marianne with that slightly unhinged energy she brought to a lot of British exploitation films around this time. The movie isn't clean, it's sweaty, full of side glances, and backstabbing. Director Pete Walker usually worked in horror, but here he stretched into thriller territory without letting go of the discomfort. Viewers were confused by the plot, but intrigued by the style. It was never banned, but it felt too off-kilter for mainstream success. Over time, that same weirdness gave it cult appeal. It doesn't explain everything, and that's part of why it works. Goodbye Gemini opens with twins arriving in London, and it ends with one of them strangling the other. Jackie and Julian Dewar are close in a way that makes people uncomfortable. They carry around a teddy bear named Agamemnon, and drift through nightclubs, strip bars, and late-night parties like they're looking for something they can't say out loud. Julian becomes obsessed with Jackie in a way that makes it hard to tell if he's protecting her or trying to possess her. When they meet Clive, a low-level pimp, the dynamic shifts. Clive sees Jackie as an opportunity, and Julian as weak. But Clive misjudges just how far the twins are willing to go. After a drugged-up assault, a knife, and a bizarre ceremony involving the teddy bear, Clive ends up dead. Jackie loses her memory. Julian loses his mind. What follows is a slow spiral toward a tragic end. The film never pulls back. It stays in that strange, uncomfortable space. Director Alan Gibson leaned on heavy symbolism, using Agamemnon like a third sibling. Judy Geeson played Jackie, with a sort of vacant fragility that stuck in people's heads. Censors hated the incest theme. British theaters backed away. Moral campaigners lumped it in with other decadent youth films that year. It disappeared for a while before getting rediscovered by horror fans. who didn't mind that it didn't feel like horror. It's stylish, broken, and strange in the way only 70s British exploitation could get away with.